I was informed that I was going to be the moderator for this event by my speaking coach. That would be Nancy Terr. So it's really a pleasure to be here today and share this wonderful event with everybody, including, as John said, the members of, family members of some of the people who started this congregation back a century and a half ago. A century and a half ago. Doesn't seem possible. Seems like it was just yesterday. But how great to be here. And even though John said it once, I'm going to repeat it. A shout out to Nancy Terr and all the Terrs for putting together a phenomenal event.
Yay!
Las Vegas retreat, it is not easy. And when you guys stand up and wave, so we know you are.
Those who can stand up. Okay.
And Sheila is getting through. And she did, everybody shared the work.
Yeah.
Very good, wasn't it?
Somebody else I'd like to recognize who I invited to come today and unfortunately left a message for and could not reach him. If any of you saw the article on the front page of the Albuquerque Journal from last September, many of you may have seen it when it actually was published, by the intrepid reporter from the journal, Ollie Reed, who wrote the article that really turned out to be the catalyst for funding the acquisition of the Montefiore temple. And when that article was published, I sent a copy of it out to a lot of my family members, and it got amazing exposure and was wound up being the result was that there were donations that came for the GoFundMe effort to buy back the temple from all over, not only New Mexico, but people from all over the country. It was amazing, the response. And so that article, I think, was really played a big part in the community's ability to acquire back the temple. So even though he's not here, Ollie, thank you for doing a great job, and I just wanted to recognize him. There are a number of people who would like to speak today, and in no particular order, I'm just going to name them off and ask them to come up. And I'm going to start, not because he's a relative, but because he's going to have some remarks from somebody that we all wished was here, thought was going to be here, and unfortunately wasn't able to make it. So I'm going to ask my cousin, Meyer, to come up and just say a few words that his father, Jerry Meyer, asked him to say. Lee?
Thank you, Larry. It's great seeing all of you here. And as Larry said, my father was taken ill yesterday. He was coming down. He is 103, and he walks without a cane. I don't, but anyway, he runs without a cane. Yeah, he runs without a cane. Right. He as a matter of fact, had 4 gold medals from the Senior Olympics in Albuquerque a year before that, so he's very vital, and he's just struck by not being able to be here. However, he sent me a little message that he wanted me to convey. He said, please tell those who gather tomorrow to rededicate Temple Montefiore that I greatly regret not being with them. I had thought about the ceremony and was anxious to participate. To Larry Ilfeld for his fundraising efforts, Nancy Terr for her on-site and organizational efforts, and to all those who traveled to Las Vegas for the ceremony, thank you, and know that I am a celebrant with you. Shalom, Jerry Meyer. For my own personal, Larry said that he and I are cousins. That's true. We don't admit it, but that's true. I am Ilfeld, and also a stop. So I have all of this. And my grandmother, Beatrice, called her Tubby for one, I don't know if you were overweight. But anyway, filled me with a good bit of this that we heard here. And it is a tremendous, I guess, a lot of gratitude for this ability or this opportunity to be here today. And I guess, Nancy, again, thank you so much for all of this work. I was in Las Vegas. I came here when I was 8 or 10, I guess, something like that. And I remember this temple when it was a Jewish temple. It didn't have a rabbi, but got together for holy days, and various members took turns, officiating for those ceremonies. So this holds a special place in my heart. And again, thanks to all of you who, through Herculean efforts, were able to get this building and what it means to all of us back into the family. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee. Thank you. Next on the list is Florence Beier, an Ilfeld, who would like to say a few words and who came here from Bend, is it? Bend, Oregon? From Bend, Oregon to be here today.
I just want to give you a very short version of my grandfather, Ludwig, who was certainly not only important in the founding of Montefiore, but often acted as the rabbi when there wasn't one available, because he had learned all the prayers when he grew up in Germany. I'll just go to a very, very short, because people were getting hungry. He was born in Bad Homburg, where many of the Ilfelds came from. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Bad Homburg. It's a pretty neat place in Germany. He was born in 1874 and came to America to work for his uncles, Herman and Charles, in New Mexico. And but he was a little restless, but he came and went for a short time. And then the interesting thing, and I want to get this connection in here, he stayed with his uncle Charles, who was married to Adela Nordhaus. How many Nordhauses are here? And Adela Nordhaus had a niece who was visiting, and her name was Minnie. And Ludwig and Minnie fell in love and got married. And that was the start of our branch of the Ilfeld family. So we're Nordhauses and Ilfelds. We get a double treat. Among the other things that he did while he was here, and I want to respect the appetite, is he purchased a hardware store on a Bridge Street right down here from David Winternet. Someone else mentioned his name. And ran the hardware store until he died. And also set up my father Max in the hardware store in Las Vegas. In Taos, from Las Vegas, all right, excuse me. So I grew up in Taos, and my father had Ilfeld hardware furniture on the plaza in Taos, and it's still there. It's not like it's a gift shop or whatever. I just want to say of the other things that he did, he was the fire chief for 40 years in Las Vegas. He helped organize the Cowboys reunion, and Teddy Roosevelt wrote his scores. And he was just an amazing person. He was certainly very prominent in Montefiore, and when he died, the whole front page of the newspaper here had a banner headline for him, and his funeral was run by the fire department with all the fire engines and everybody from Las Vegas. And so I'm going to stop there, but I have a 6-page synopsis, which I can use. I have several copies here if someone can have them until they're gone. And I can also put it on, I have it in the internet. If you give me your email, I will email it to you.
I just want to say, this is Ludwig with the Romero Fire Department here.
Yes, he was the fire chief.
Florence, thank you.
Are you going to do Q&A?
That was great. Anybody who knew Ludwig, and there are a few people in this room who knew him, Ludwig was truly a living legend in Las Vegas. He was a unique and quite a character. I met him when I was very, very young. I was so young that I don't remember much about him, but when I visit, I'm from Boston, in case you can't tell by the peculiar way that I talk. And I remember meeting him as a very young boy when I came out here on vacations with my parents. He was truly something else. And how many people here are from Las Vegas? Live here now, I mean live here now. So you all remember, was it 8 years ago when they had the 100th reunion of the Cowboy Reunion? They had the big parade through town. That was, that event was a commemoration of the event that Ludwig Ilfeld started back in 1915. Next on the list is it Jim Vorenberg?
Thank you.
Jim, nice to meet you.
Well, being the oldest living Vorenberg at the moment, they asked me to come up here and say a few words. Bring your microphone. Raise the microphone. Everybody hear me all right?
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
You gotta get closer to the phone.
Okay.
If I touch anything mechanical, it's broken.
See, that's what happens when you're 6'6" and you're a tower over there. I kind of stand out in the crowd. What can I say? I think we're good. Everybody here? Do I need to start? As the oldest living remaining Vorenberg, they've asked me to come up here and speak, say a few words about my family history and stuff. My great-grandfather's son came to this country in 1865 to the Mora Valley. He settled in the Mora Valley. And he was born in 1860, I think. Yeah. Anyway, he came through the port of Philadelphia and settled in the Mora Valley. Went into business there, and the Ilfelds were a big part of his business, because I can remember visiting the Ilfelds at their house in West Las Vegas, actually, and going into Ilfeld Harbor all the time when I was a kid, because after he started his business in Mora, he moved into Whiting, so I grew up in Whiting. Briefly, he had a brother Adolf that also came over a couple years before he did. He settled in Tucumcari. We had the Vorenberg Hotel down in Tucumcari. Simon Vorenberg, my great-grandfather, Teresa's grandfather. I've got my cousin Teresa here, my two daughters, Jennifer and Melissa, are here. So, anyway, Grandpa Simons actually started the post office in Cleveland. He was also a delegate to a convention that elected got New Mexico statehood when he lived in Wagnon. He died in 1926 in Wagnon. There's a lot of history here, and I don't know if I need to go into all of that. But anyway, talking about the Ilfelds, that kind of jogged a lot of memories. And I can remember coming when I was a kid, coming to Vegas, and we go to Ilfeld Harbor and go to Tigers to buy clothes. And several other places. Just a lot of fun memories. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I don't know. Oh, I can. My great-grandfather Salman married Julia Herburger, and they lived across the road from each other back in Warren. One was in Warren, one was in Cleveland.
Remember the twins from me?
They're both married. They're both my great-grandparents are buried in the cemetery out here. The Vorenbergs and the Harbers both. And my Uncle Saul Harburg was living and working in Taos. In his later years, he worked for the Ilfeld company, and then he eventually took over the Ilfeld store there in the Taos Plaza. And then eventually, I think he got out of that business and went down the street and opened a lumber yard. So the Vorenbergs and the Ilfelds are intertwined. It's just one of those things that we're all kind of related to each other, one or another. Okay. Any questions?
I do, because, well, I was hoping Florence would stop for questions, but I'm hoping that as you speak, if any of you founder people had any experience of seeing this place before it was sold. Were any of you in this building while it was still a synagogue?
I was never in this building before it was sold, but I remember it because I went to Highlands in the early 60s.
Kind of trying to recreate and knock out the confessional and put it back to where it was,
Well, Lee was in it, right? Lee Meyer was in it beforehand, Nancy. Right.
Yeah. Well, I live in Las Cruces, so I came up especially for this.
Thank you.
I met the Deckers down in Las Cruces. They gave me a bunch of prayer books to bring up, so Nancy's got them squirreled away somewhere. So.
I went to Lilo Lang's wedding here, and I think I went to Julia Harper's funeral.
Could be, yeah. My great-grandma, I can remember she lived over around the corner of 6th and Columbia.
Right.
Yeah. Because I can still remember my great-grandmother Julia and my great-grandmother Teresa back in the late 40s, early 50s. A lot of history there with all of us. About all I got. Anybody else? Thank you.
Larry?
Ma'am.
John's going to go next because he said he could talk.
Good, great, okay.
Yeah.
And Richard?
And then Ava.
Okay.
John and Ava. Put them in the lineup.
Okay.
Thank you.
So John is next. John.
I'll be very quick. even though I don't think we'd ever met before today, Jim and I are cousins, and I just want to take a minute to express a simple idea, and that is here in New Mexico, the German-Jewish mercantile network, there was a continuous interchange from roughly the 1840s until the Nazis came to power. And so a 200-year history of two Jewish networks coming back and forth, quite literally. I'm sure there's a lot. In fact, I've recently seen several Vorenbergs going back to Germany to visit family on the stuff that you can pull up on Ancestry.com. But the Vorenbergs and the Wertheims are actually pretty close. So to make a long story very short, and I've left a couple of interesting things in the back that might help people remember, is that essentially the Ilfelds would employ a lot of German Jews, some of whom may have been distantly related. My grandfather, who came from Germany in 1927, always said that we were, for example, cousins of the Nordhauses, and I've only found one tangential connection way back in Germany. I would kind of think that if we dug around, there's probably some connection back in Germany with the Ilfelds as well. But I do know that the Ilfelds employed a lot of Wertheims and had business relations with the Vorenbergs. So to make a long story short, my great uncle Jacob came up here to work for the Ilfelds. He then left Las Vegas pretty quickly and stole a manager, Max Goldenberg, from the Ilfelds, and started M.B. Goldenberg and Company in Tucumcari, New Mexico. In the process, he brought his cousins, Joseph and Herman Wertheim, who married two Vorenberg sisters. So we're literally cousins, several, up generations, across generations, all across the board. So the Vorenbergs, the Goldenbergs, that all started the operations in Tucumcari. So you had two Vorenberg sisters marrying Herman and Joseph Wertheim, and ultimately went down to Carlsbad, New Mexico. And then also you have the Goldenbergs marrying two Wertheim sisters. And so Joseph and Herman were here. While they were here in 1915, their infant son, Joseph's infant son, died and is buried in Montefiore Cemetery. And Nancy Terr was nice enough to find an article in the New Mexican about kids cleaning up the cemetery back in 2003, and it's a particularly touching tombstone, this one-year-old infant, Joseph Wertheim Jr. But anyway, the point is this exchange occurred for nearly 200 years. My first ancestor to come to New Mexico that I've been able to figure out is a guy named Joseph Rosenstein who came to Santa Fe in 1860. He brought all of the Rosensteins. The Rosensteins are who my great-grandmother, and their descendants are the Bebos in western New Mexico, and also the Seligmans, who started the Berlioz Mercantile Company. Long and short of it, my grandfather came here in 1927, started working for his cousins at the Berlioz Merc, which was both a competitor and a buyer of Charles Ilfeld stuff. My grandfather broke off from the Berlioz Merc and started stores across eastern New Mexico. He ultimately settled in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, where my father was born. My father, I talked with him, he really wanted to be here. But right now, my wife Bianca and I have an office in the old Ilfeld warehouse on Commercial Street in Albuquerque. And it has been converted into a commercial building, the Verge building. And my dad was talking about when he was a kid, he remembers driving from Fort Sumner. My grandfather had a store there to buy goods from the Ilfelds back in the early days when the company was still going. And so the bottom line is I just want to intimate what kind of world was destroyed by the Nazis. We always know that. And a lot of the Ilfelds, my grandfather, the Goldenbergs, the Vorenbergs, saved a lot of people, their cousins, from the Holocaust. They couldn't save everybody, but they saved a number. And there are cousins all over this country that owe their lives to that connection that endured for nearly 200 years until the Nazis destroyed it. So the things that I've left are real simple. There's this cool postcard that a cousin of mine, Arthur Kingston Kernestal down in Carlsbad, sent me like 20 years ago. That's Joseph Wertheim, whose son is buried in Montefiore. He sent this postcard back to Germany in 1909. And so he's dressed in Indian garb, and it was sent from Tucumcari. It wasn't sent from Las Vegas, but it's sitting over there. And then I printed off the Vorenberg Wertheim family tree as far as, because it confuses the heck out of me, just to clarify all the relationships. And then, interestingly enough, the town where my grandfather came from, which is a town called Helmershausen. If you draw a triangle from Frankfurt, Germany, north to Kassel, which is an industrial town in central Germany, across basically to Dortmund, those three major cities in Germany, that triangle is where I think virtually every founder in this room is from. These little towns scattered in that triangle, which is maybe takes you nowadays 2 hours to get across in modern Germany. And it's really fascinating. So a Gentile woman in Germany who's a historian, wrote a history of the Jews of my grandfather's hometown, which is very near to another town called Borgentrash, where a lot of the Vorenbergs, people who are descended through the Vorenbergs are from. Anyway, it is about the Jews of that town. Many of us are related, stretching all the way back to the 30 Years' War, the 1600s. So much for the wandering Jew. The house in that town was, my family had lived in for 200 years before the Nazis seized it. And so it's an interesting book. It's in German. But you can look at a family tree in the back that stretches literally all the way back to the 1600s. So I really want to thank Nancy and John and the whole gang and the Ilfelds for putting this together. It's an important thing to keep in mind, this history of the constant interchange between two countries and a whole culture.
More fascinating information. Nancy, who did you say was next?
Ava.
Ava.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, Ava.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I want to stand on the step.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Hi. Well, I'll pick up the story after the war. I'm Ava Salman. My late husband David is from the Salman family, and his grandfather, William Salman, whose name in Europe was Wolf, he was he had a shipping company, and he came to the United States when he was 16 and started working on the docks, and as many Jewish entrepreneurs, he ended up becoming a stevedore and then building his own ships. And in World War II, he gave up his company to go become a colonel in the Navy, and he managed the port of Le Havre for D-Day. And after the war, he had many relatives that perished. And the family was stationed in Houston because that was the shipping port. But after the war, he was extremely upset, and he, with one of his best friends, started to drive from Houston through Texas, went all through the West looking for a ranch because he wanted to move his children somewhere safe. And I don't know if many of you have read the book, To the End of the Earth. I think that was kind of his journey, where he was looking to take his family. Well, he kept going north and north and north, and he stopped in Las Vegas and bought the ranch. There was a large land grant in La Cueva, which is in Moore County, that was in 3 pieces. Originally it was one large piece, but it had been broken up, and he came and bought all 3 pieces and put it back together again. And it was like a little Yellowstone. It was like 32,000 acres, and he moved. His family lived down the street on 8th Street, and then he eventually moved the whole family to the Salman Ranch. And so it's post-founders, but I think that he was they were an important family. He was an important part of the community. I still have people in Santa Fe that will stop and say, your grandfather paid my tuition at Highlands and helped me create my life. William Salman had three kids. He had Bill, his oldest, David, Salman, and David was best friends with Marvin Tiger. And Marvin actually had a house that bordered the Salman Ranch. And so they all grew up together. And, you know, as many of the kids in that generation, they all went to Ivy League schools. I think Marvin went to Harvard, and David and Bill went to Princeton. So I guess a lot of the kids used to leave Robertson and go off to this. And I guess the other sister, Fifi, she went to Stanford. So the Salman Ranch is no more. It's a billionaire owns it now. But you know, it's been an important part of my life. I'm from Chicago. I'm actually first generation. My mother was born in Vienna, and came here in 1939. So for me, you know, I'm like a city girl that ended up in the middle of New Mexico, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. My husband passed 11 months ago, so I'm glad to be here, be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. Is it still named the Salman Ranch? It is? No? What is it called? I remember reading about when it was sold.
Yeah, I think it's called the Cueva Ranch. I'm not sure.
That ranch really was a historic ranch in New Mexico.
Yes.
And I think it was sold, maybe 4 years ago, something like that? I remember when they had that historic Las Vegas Cowboys reunion in 2015. Some of the cowboys from that came to the rodeo that was part of that celebration. So
The Kaisers?
yeah, they had cowboys from everywhere come and participate in a rodeo after the parade. So Nancy, is there anyone else before Ted Herburger?
Richard, and then me, and then Ted.
Okay.
And then tomorrow. Then Ted.
Nancy has all this agenda in her head.
I have it written down.
Why didn't I get a copy?
My head is on.
Well, good afternoon. I'm an imposter here today because I'm a Presbyterian. But the Presbyterians were among the newcomers that the Jewish community here welcomed to Las Vegas back in the day. The first Presbyterian minister or missionary, I guess you would call him, arrived here in 1869 and started building his church up on the hill in Old Town in 1870. And 40% of the subscribers to buying property that church stands on were from the Jewish community in Las Vegas at that time. And then later on, you all know the history of this congregation. You built in 1884 down on Douglas Avenue. But that was just before, in 1880, when we built the Presbyterian building down there, just a block away from it. But then you left the neighborhood. I don't know why that was. Came up here on what people call Zion Hill. But, so that was a little history I want to share with you of how generous your community was to other communities in Las Vegas at the time. And then I didn't quite know when Nancy said to come here today that this would be kind of like Old Home Week in a lot of ways. I mean, to find Lee Meyer's here, I was telling him, I said, "Are you the famous E. Gerald Myers from Heinrich University?" And he says, "No, I'm his son." And I said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "Well, I guess that's true, because my father, who taught at Highlands, would always say that E. Gerald Myers was one of the fine young faculty members that they hired when my dad was here." Because my dad would have been 116 this year, so, but I knew Lee. And then to hear names like Jim Vorenberg here, I can tell you personally, maybe you haven't all known Jim for all the time, but he's no shorter than he was when I knew him back in the day. a very tall guy that came down from Wertheim to Vegas every now and then, and he'd say, wow, where did he come from? And talking about the Salman Ranch, and David Salman was my alumni interviewer from Princeton when I was going to college, and he very wisely kept me out of Princeton, but I did well in Dartmouth, I guess, for a while. But in the middle there, so we have some ties, to each other through the time of hearing all of these names and places. And I've been familiar with these fading names on buildings for all my life. I moved here when I was 2, long time ago. But then the last thing I just want to share with you, if you haven't seen it, if you've been to the, and it was nice to hear Delaney the name from the Ilfeld pronounced with the German E on the end, because you don't hear that around here very often. But anyway, a few years ago, my wife and I commissioned a portrait of Adela Ilfeld to be put in the Ilfeld Auditorium when they redid the place. Thought maybe it was appropriate, and the Ilfeld family was very gracious in saying that we could do that, because it was something they could have done, if they wanted, if they have portraits. We wanted to maybe buy an old portrait, but we commissioned a new one and had a competition here at Highlands, and got a portrait of her painted, and that's over in the lobby of Ilfeld Auditorium. So if you're ever over there, look up a blast from the past there. Anyway, I'm glad to be here today with you. Who?
You didn't introduce yourself for our visitors.
I didn't say my name?
No.
Well, it means nothing, but Richard Lindeborg. Maybe it's interesting. My wife and I both had separate jobs in eastern Kansas at a local university called Baker University. And we went out separately for interviews. When she went out there for her interview, she got the tour of Baldwin, Kansas by this pillar of the community lady, and she thought that with the name Lindeborg that we should tell her how we were going to live as Jews in Baldwin, Kansas. I thought that was always strange, because they're only a few miles from Lindeborg, Kansas, where the Swedes were, but you can't always tell the difference, right? But it was really good to see all of the film their Las Vegas names all day here today. Thank you.
Since you didn't give me the agenda, who's next?
There were just 2 editions.
I have the modified, the unmodified agenda here.
I'm sorry. I didn't know either.
No, that's it.
I think it's my turn, right?
Your turn? It's your turn, right?
I'm kind of embarrassed because you keep saying my name, but really, if you are on the board, or you help this, and Marshall, and Philip, and Kate, everybody knows who to thank. I can do it. And really, just about everybody here made a contribution to this building. The Ilfelds were super generous, for all of you were. Our visitors from out of town, and it happened. Okay, let me see. So I'm going to introduce a few people who are visiting here that you may not know. And first is Stan Hardy's and Helen's. Wave, Stan. And if you are not from New Mexico or academia, you might not know Stan was the state historian, and he made it cool to be Jewish, again, I think. Don't you agree? I mean, nobody really thought much about it, but you still Stan.
I mean, it wasn't always.
Well, I just don't know. Stan did mountains and mountains of research, and he's a very important person. You should read his books. And Linda Goff, who is the president of the New Mexico Jewish Historical Society. And I think more and more we're going to dovetail together. She arranged for us to get these beautiful panels in the back of the room. Just take a good look. Do you want to say anything about that?
The New Mexico Jewish Historical Society has been a collaborator and friend, not only of the Las Vegas Jewish community, but many others throughout the state. And we work hard together to make sure we preserve and share this very rich history that goes back almost 500 years. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And also Diane Layden, Dr. Diane Layden will probably write up all the gossip. She is
I'll be your scribe.
our scribe. She's got beautiful articles about the Historical Society. I know I'm forgetting a lot of people who came. The Armijo family is represented here by Christina Armijo, who's very close to the Teicherts. Our wonderful members and bakers from Albuquerque, and our other members, Marlene, Wade, and I'm going to tell you, many of you will be getting membership letters. You don't have to live in Las Vegas. You don't have to be Jewish. You just have to want to be a member of this endeavor. So we'll probably send you a letter. Okay, next thing. I want to know if this is hard part. I wish the people who we wish were here. And our condolences for David. It's very sorry. And of course, all the Teicherts, Marvin Teichert, who endowed the cemetery, and Melvin and Francis, and all that we talked about him. My own family, the Terrs, and whoever, you have so many relatives that didn't make it, right? But we do it for them. Now, before I stop, I just want to give you a real quick status update. And if you're on the board, just jump in, please, okay? The status update of this Las Vegas Jewish community is we've got the building, and little by little, we're trying to improve it and preserve it. So input about anything it looked like would be great. We will take out the confessional, understand? But it's kind of cool. If anybody knows what happened to the window, I think Philip mentioned it went to the... Philip, did that window go to the Presbyterians or the Methodists? If you know what happened to the stained glass window that would have been behind the Ten Commandments, we'd like to know.
I think it went to the Presbyterians.
Presbyterians, Richard. And also any ideas about where the organ might be, that would be kind of cool. Man in Albuquerque donated these pews when he heard about our building. And I think they probably came from the church somewhere, but that was kind of nice of him. And our next part, we got heat, plumbing, a few things. We're getting a kitchen in the house next door as part of this property. So it's coming along. Our next project is to raise money to have some museum quality display cases so we can get Rabbi Feldman's materials and also to get ADT security, although we have man from Las Cruces built doors on the Ark, and after we eat, if anybody wants to see the Ark or the Torah, we'll open it. So we basically we got the building, but we don't really have any operational funds, like to get a rabbi for very long. So we're basically writing grants, but if you've got skills or you want to help us with these bookcases or you know someone who knows someone, let us know.
Or if you have money.
What?
Or if you have money.
Well, we're raising money, but we also need help figuring the whole thing out, how to preserve all these documents, if you've got expertise. And just a little business, make sure that you sign in as you know about after. So we'll have lunch, and then after lunch, we'll kind of clean the food away so you have more time for the documents, and we'll show you the Torah, and then Ted will he'll talk to you about the cemetery tour. Did I get everything, Sheila? Where are you?
Cemetery tour later?
Ted's going to talk about that.
Ted's after me. But Sheila, where are you? Zelda? Did I forget anything?
Yes, when people put down their names and their addresses, all they did was say what town they were from. We'd like to have
Oh yeah, because we'll mail you an update. And Jim is going to make the video. And then you'll send you a copy. I really we wish your dad gets well. And Fred, of course. And, excuse me, Nancy, it's allergies. What? I won't forget you. So following me is Marlis, because she is going to say a prayer that we say for the people who have passed and for whom we do this today. It's hard. And then Ted. Right, Ted? So. Clint.
There are so many people that have been remembered today. And in Judaism, as you all know, every time we remember them, their memory is a blessing. And so I would like to go through this, and your job is to just say, we remember them. And it's those from 1800s, early 1900s, and those recently lost. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys that we yearn to share, we remember them. So as long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us, as we remember them. Thank you.
Marlis, that was beautiful. Thank you. A couple of people, do we have time for a couple of people who just wanted to speak? Okay, great. Don Ilfeld wanted to reach back into the past and talk a bit about Ludwig, with whom he grew up.
Can we all get a shot at that?
We'd be here for several days.
Well, I've been told I never grew up. Anyway, I was hatched up the street here in St. Anthony's Hospital. Lived in a freshman dormitory, and a couple of months later, two of my mates and I drove in the car down to Los Angeles, I think to go to a football game against the hated USC Trojans. Everybody in Northern California hates the Trojans. And on the way down, you go down what today is Interstate 5, and you went over a mountain pass called the Grapevine, all of 4,400 feet high. And as we were going up the Grapevine, the engine blew up. Totally froze, couldn't start it, you couldn't even turn it over. It's like utter disaster. Well, one of my friends was from LA, and he called his father who sent a car out to get us. And anyway, I did get back to Northern California one way or the other. And I called my father, Carl, and I said, you know what happened to that car? What's the story? And he said, well, here's what we think happened. Your grandfather, Ludwig, took the car over to Maloof's for its periodic service. There was a fire. Ludwig walked over to Blues, took the car to the fire, and then went home for the day. You know what's coming, don't you? When he got home, Maloof called him and said, Ludwig, would you kindly bring the car back? We hadn't put the new oil in yet. But he gave the car to me because it seemed to work fine. Until I tried to get up over the grapevine. So that's a little story about Ludwig. He was a neat guy. He smoked cigars. And he often left a lit cigar on a counter in the store and did a little burn mark. And that irritated the heck out of my father. That was one of his quirks. And he was always beating on me to stand up straight, with my shoulders fat and all that sort of thing. I probably should have listened to him a little more. I used to go home with him for lunch. And my lunch recreation was to watch him fall asleep. After lunch, he would lie down with a daily outfit, our local paper. If you have the paper up here, I'll try to do this without falling down. He'd be reading the paper, and he fell asleep so slowly the paper would slowly begin to drop to the point where I started timing it. And it'd take him about 45 seconds before the paper fell out of his hands. Very irritating. But he was, to a young person in his teens, he was a wonderful grandfather, as was my father, Carl. And I worked in the store. I didn't get paid money. I got paid in phonograph records. I could take these 45 RPM records with big holes in them. So I had all the Glenn Miller records and Don Monroe and Kitty Cowan and all those people at the time. But he was a wonderful guy, and I enjoyed hearing what you all had to say about him today.
Every time I hear Ludwig's name mentioned, I think of the phrase, a legend in his own time, which he certainly was. And as well as a legend in his own mind, right, John? Jim, you wanted to say a few words.
A couple people have asked me how the Terrs came to Las Vegas, so that's what I wanted to share with you. And by the way, speaking of Ilfelds and 45s, we got our first little record player for us kids at Ilfelds. My parents brought home some 45s from there, and they were the Coasters. And that became my musical background, and I'm very thankful for that. So I'll tell you how we came to Las Vegas, according to my dad, was that we lived in a little town in Michigan, a beautiful little tourist town, and it was so small and there were so many doctors that, particularly in the wintertime when the tourists went away, there wasn't enough business for all the doctors. So my dad started looking for another place, and he claimed that he just put an ad in a medical magazine saying situation wanted, no more than that. And he got responses from several places around the country, and he got one response from a woman, Dr. Dellinger's wife, Maxine Dellinger in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And my parents were not interested in New Mexico because their only experience had been driving through on 66. They thought it was very barren and ugly. And, but he did show the letter to a friend of his, a private pilot, and he showed it to him because he thought the letter was so well organized and describing what they needed and what the town is and what it's like. And he thought that he appreciated that kind of thing. And so on that basis, he showed it to a friend of his who was a private pilot. And he said, no, that's actually a beautiful town. I've flown through there. It's not like you picture New Mexico. And Midwestern looking. And so he, on that basis, he and my mom came out here and talked to the couple that the doctor needed a partner. They liked the town. They liked the climate. They liked the fact that it was bicultural. They thought that would be a good life. And they liked that there was a university here to make the school system better. So they moved here. We moved here in '58, and they felt it was a very good life and a very good move, and I do too. Thank you. And by the way, I have a photo I printed up specifically for the Ilfelds, extended Ilfeld family. I hope you'll all ask me for a copy. Make sure to get a copy. It's a cut paper collage of the Ilfeld auditorium.
I would like a copy.
Okay.
Please. Lastly, Ted Herburger is going to talk to you about the Montefiore Cemetery and the planned tour of it, I understand, after this is over. And if you haven't been to the cemetery, it really is like a walk back in time. It's extremely interesting. I strongly recommend it. Ted?
Well, I'm Ted Herburger, and my connection to the Jewish community is that I married into the Stern family, and I was quite fond of my in-laws, and they too about me. And so anyway, so through them I met the Teicherts and the Terrs and Katz, Margaret Katz, maybe Morris Katz, some of you. And so anyway, so I became good friends with Marvin's, and I used to visit him a lot. He was all crippled up, as you well know. And so I'd go visit him, and one evening I visited, and we started talking, and he said that he had spoken to his rabbi, and I think it was the one in Santa Fe.
Hellman, maybe?
Hellman, yeah. I would play bridge with him. He says, if you want points, play with me. So anyway, so he was, Martin was concerned and spoke with the rabbi and told him that he didn't feel like he was a very good Jew. And so what could I do? So Rabbi Hellman said, well, Marvin, some Jews do this, some Jews do this, some Jews take care of cemeteries. So he said, no, I've got to do this, but I can't do it. I physically can't do it. And I was recently retired, about 5 years, I guess. And I said, well, Marvin, if you furnish the materials, and I will do the work. If you don't ride me, I will be appreciated. I will work only summers, and this is the way we started. So, this has been a labor of love for me to honor my in-laws because they were so super great, and in turn honoring all of your relatives by fixing the cemetery. I started in 1993, and that's been a good while ago, just a little piece at a time. And I was looking through the photographs that I have on that table over there, and I'm surprised even myself as to what I have accomplished. So, and also, I had two helpers, and we paid them. And one plot in particular, the stone is a tree that was about 7 feet tall, about 3,000 pounds or something, and it had sunk into the ground about 24 inches. And so, with the help of block and tackle and my 74-year-old mother, we raised it up and put a foundation under it, and there's pictures there. Some of the albums there have a before picture and an after picture of the plot, family plots. So anyway, I didn't use any machinery because I didn't want to get run over graves. And so I did it all with just a tripod and a blocking tackle.
And your 74-year-old mother.
My 74-year-old mother, yeah. Yes. And so anyway, my biggest accomplishment is that as you can see, Stan Hortings wrote a little piece that I posted at the cemetery, and it says, in this town in northern New Mexico, and then it goes on to say about the Jewish community. And he describes the cemetery as overgrown with reeds and brush and trees. And it was a shambles. Stones laying all over. The family plots had a wall of stone and sandstone on top. But their cement had deteriorated down to powder. It was no longer a good wall. And so we pulled up the weeds and cleaned it up, and you can see pictures of that, just rocks all over the place. And so slowly, after years and years, we are at where we are now. And my biggest accomplishment is to restore all these family plots of mine and your relatives. And it's must say this myself, is it quite beautiful now, because it was really, really bad. And so my next biggest accomplishment was in 1883, I guess, or something. The Montefiore Cemetery Association bought a plot of land from the Ilfelds, which are next door to us. And the contract for the stone wall that surrounds all three cemeteries, the Ilfelds, the Masonic, and us, was a stone wall about 4 feet high, 3 or 4 feet high. And some of the stones the top stones weigh like 300, 350 pounds each. And I built 410 feet of it. And the pictures are back there. So it's a great accomplishment. And one of my goals is that's only on the north end. My goal is to wall off the south end. Or the west end, I guess it is, west. We started it this last year, and the stones were so heavy that the contractor I hired just walked off the job. So anyway, I'm looking for a contractor and for money. So anyway, this was the second biggest accomplishment I've had. And it gave me an opportunity to pay back to the Stearns, which I love, like my own. So anyway, if you look at the pictures, you'll see the before and after pictures, which was a huge departure from what I found. And that's what I've been doing, and that's what I'll continue doing. I'm 84, so I think I have another 10 years.
Ted, thank you. As I said, the tour through that cemetery is really worthwhile. And I hadn't been there in years since I did a number of the cleanups. And when I went back, it really does look amazing. So even if you've been there a long time ago, haven't been there recently, it's worth seeing. With that, I want to just say thank you all for being here and participating in this great ceremony. It was really a pleasure meeting everybody. And Mazel Tov. And don't forget all the great food that's in the back there. does.
Hey, thanks, pal.
I'm Ron.